There was a time in my life when I dreaded mornings, not because anything specific had happened the night before. Just the moment my eyes opened, it was already there. The weight of everything I hadn't solved yet. The bills, the tension I hadn't talked through, the work that never felt like enough. Before my feet even touched the floor, my mind was already running through the list of everything that was wrong. If that's where you are this morning, I see you. I've been exactly there. Back when I was in the middle of the worst stretch of my life, burnout, anxiety, that specific kind of tired that sleep doesn't touch. I had this habit I didn't even notice I had. Every morning, before I said a single word to God, I'd already said about 40 words to myself. And none of them were kind. None of them were hopeful. I was building the frame for my whole day before I even stood up. And the frame was fear. What I didn't know then, and what took me longer to learn than I'd like to admit, is that the morning doesn't have to start in complaint, to be honest. You can start in the exact same hard place and still start differently. Not pretending things are fine, not performing gratitude you don't feel, just shifting where you're standing before you walk into the day. That's what this prayer is about. Before we're done, we're going to bring everything you woke up carrying, the heaviness, the worry, whatever's sitting on your chest right now, and we're going to lay it down together. Not because it disappears, but because you don't have to pick it back up alone. There's something I want to say before we get there, though. Something I noticed on that dark morning that I almost dismissed as nothing. I want you to hear it first. The reason I show up here every single day, and I mean every day without exception, is because I know what it's like to need a voice that stays. Not a sermon, not a lecture, just someone who sits with you in the hard part of the morning and doesn't rush you out of it. So if you want a place to come back to every morning, subscribe. There's a new prayer here every day. And if this found you at the right moment, a like helps it reach someone else who needs it too. Okay, let's go into this together. There's something that happens in the first few seconds after you wake up, before you check your phone, before you remember what day it is. There's this brief moment, maybe 2-3 seconds, where everything is still quiet, where nothing has weight yet. And then it hits. The thing you didn't resolve yesterday. The conversation that's still sitting there, unfinished. The number in your bank account that you've been trying not to think about. The relationship that feels like it's held together by the thinnest thread. The job that's taking everything from you and somehow still asking for more. It all comes back. And it comes back fast. I know that feeling. Not as something I read about, as something I lived inside for a long time. There was a stretch of years where I couldn't tell you what it felt like to wake up light. Every morning started with that weight already in my chest. Not a specific thought. Not yet. Just heaviness. Like my body already knew the day was going to cost me something. And the worst part wasn't the problems themselves. It was how automatic it was. I wasn't choosing to start the day in dread. I just was. Before I decided anything, before I prayed anything, before I said a word, the frame for my whole day was already built. And it was built out of everything that was wrong. If you've been waking up like this most mornings, or maybe every morning, I want you to hear something before we go any further. This isn't weakness. This isn't what a failing faith looks like. This is what happens when the mind has learned to go to the hard things first and nobody ever showed it a different way to begin. There's a verse in Lamentations, one of the most heartbroken books in the Bible, written by someone sitting in the middle of complete loss, that says his mercies are new every morning. And I remember reading that during one of the hardest periods of my life and thinking, that's a beautiful sentence, I just don't feel it. Maybe you know that feeling too. The problem isn't that you don't believe it. The problem is that belief and experience can be miles apart in the morning. You can know something is true and still wake up inside the weight of everything that feels true first. And when that gap is wide enough for long enough, you start looking for ways to close it. You try things. You make efforts. Some of them spiritual, some of them not. And most of those things, I tried them too. For longer than I'd like to admit. And there's something I want to be honest with you about before we go any further. Because I think what most of us reach for when we're in that place might actually be making it harder to get out. Here's what I did, and maybe you'll recognize this. When the morning felt too heavy, when I woke up and the weight was already there before I even knew what day it was, I would try to pray my way out of it. And I don't mean pray in a quiet, present way. I mean try to feel my way out of it through prayer. Like if I said the right things in the right order with enough sincerity, something would lift. The heaviness would break, and I'd finally be able to start the day from a good place. So I'd start listing things I was grateful for, because that's what you're supposed to do, right? Count your blessings. Find the good. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for my health. Thank you for my family. All true, all real. And yet, I'd be saying the words and feeling almost nothing. Or worse, feeling like a liar. Because somewhere underneath the gratitude list, the anxiety was still there. The dread was still there. I was just putting words on top of it and hoping they'd be heavy enough to hold it down. And when it didn't work, when I finished the prayer and still felt the weight, I'd tell myself I hadn't done it right. I hadn't meant it enough. I wasn't grateful enough. So I'd try again. More words, more effort, more performance. I did that for months. Every morning the same cycle. Try to feel grateful, fail to feel grateful, feel guilty for failing, try again. There's a phrase that gets used a lot in spiritual circles, pray until something changes. And I used to take that literally. Like the goal was to pray until the feeling shifted, until I could manufacture enough sincerity that God would finally step in and take the heaviness away. But here's what nobody told me, and what I slowly, painfully started to notice. The harder I tried to feel my way into gratitude, the more hollow it felt, like I was trying to start a fire with wet wood. More effort, less flame. And I don't think this is uncommon. I think a lot of people who genuinely want to pray, who want to start their day with God, are stuck in exactly this loop, trying to arrive at a feeling before they've been honest about where they actually are, trying to be grateful before they've been real. The problem isn't the gratitude. The problem is what comes before it, or more precisely, what we skip. I didn't understand that for a long time, and when I finally started to see why this approach kept falling flat, not just for me, but spiritually at the level of what prayer actually is, it changed something fundamental about how I showed up in the morning. That's what I want to get into now. Let me start with something that sounds simple, almost too simple. You woke up this morning. I know that sounds like nothing, like the most ordinary thing in the world. But stay with me for a second, because I think we've been so trained to rush past that fact that we've completely lost what it means. There's a passage in one of the most heartbroken books of the Bible, Lamentations, written by someone who had just watched everything fall apart. His city destroyed, his people in ruins. And in the middle of all of that loss, he writes something that stopped me cold when I finally read it slowly. He says, "His mercies are new every morning, not new every time you pray correctly, not new when you feel grateful enough, new every morning." As in, the morning itself is the mercy. The fact that you opened your eyes today is not a neutral event. It's God saying, "I'm not done with you yet." Now, I used to read that verse and feel vaguely inspired by it, like a nice thought to start the day. But I wasn't really hearing what it was saying, because if morning itself is mercy, if waking up is already God showing up, then the prayer doesn't need to create the connection. The connection is already there. The prayer is the response to something that already happened before you said a single word. That's what I was missing. And it sounds small, but it completely changes the architecture of what you're doing when you pray in the morning. Think about it this way. When you try to pray your way into gratitude, when you build the list, perform the thankfulness, try to manufacture the feeling, you're operating as if God's presence depends on your effort, like you need to earn the connection before it's real. Like you arrive at the prayer empty and need to fill yourself before you're allowed to begin. But that's not what the invitation actually is. There's a line that stayed with me for a long time. Come to me, all who are weary. Not come to me when you've gathered yourself. Not come to me when you've organized your faith. Come as you are. Come carrying it. Come tired. Come without the words. Just come. The error isn't that we pray in the morning. The error is that we think we need to fix ourselves before we show up. We try to arrive at God in a better state than we're actually in. And in doing that, in performing the gratitude we think we should feel, we skip the most honest part of prayer, the part where we just tell the truth about where we are. And here's what I've come to understand about that. God already knows where you are. He was there through the night. He's the reason you opened your eyes. The prayer isn't informing him of your situation. It's you turning towards someone who has been facing you the whole time. When I understood that, really understood it, not as theology but as something I felt in my chest, the gratitude list stopped feeling like an obligation. Because I wasn't trying to create something that wasn't there. I was responding to something that already was. That's the foundation. And with that in place, what I want to show you next is going to land differently than it would have 10 minutes ago. But first, just one moment before we continue. If what we've been talking about is landing somewhere real for you, if you've recognized something in the last few minutes that feels true about where you've been, I want to tell you about something I put together for exactly this. Because one video can open a door. But what most people need isn't a single morning of clarity. It's 30 mornings of it. I created a devotional called 30 Days of Faith, a guided prayer devotional. Every day for 30 days there's a prayer, written and recorded by me, that meets you where you actually are, not where you think you should be. The same way we've been doing this together today, but for a full month. A structure for your faith when everything else feels unstructured. It's available as a PDF and as audio, so you can read it or just listen, whichever fits your morning. The link is in the description. It's called 30 Days of Faith. Now, let's get back to this. So here's what changed. Not the problems, not the anxiety, not the weight that was there when I opened my eyes. What changed was the first word of the prayer. Instead of starting with thank you, instead of trying to arrive at gratitude before I'd been honest, I started with something simpler, something I should have started with all along. I started with here. God, here I am. That's it. Not God, thank you for this beautiful day. Not Lord, I come before you with a grateful heart. Just, here I am. This is where I am. This is what I'm carrying. I'm not pretending it's lighter than it is. I'm not performing a version of myself that has it together. I'm just showing up, as I actually am. And the first time I prayed that way, really prayed it, not as a technique but as the most honest thing I could say, something shifted. Not the circumstances, not the feeling in my chest, but something underneath the feeling. Like a foundation that had been shaky suddenly had a little more ground under it. Because I wasn't lying anymore. I wasn't trying to convince God, or myself, that I was somewhere I wasn't. I was just present. And presence, I've come to understand, is the beginning of everything in prayer. Here's what I mean. The error we talked about, trying to pray your way into gratitude, performing thankfulness before you feel it, that approach fails because it requires you to fix yourself before you come to God. It puts the work in the wrong place. It says, get yourself ready, then pray. But what I discovered, and what that passage in Lamentations was saying all along, is that the mercy is already there when you wake up. You don't create it by praying correctly. You receive it by showing up honestly. The prayer doesn't earn the connection. The prayer is the turning toward a connection that was already there. So when I stopped trying to manufacture gratitude and started with here I am, what happened was the gratitude eventually came. Not because I forced it, because I was finally being real. And in that realness, I could actually see what was already true. I was still here. Another morning. Another day that God hadn't walked away from. You woke up is not a neutral fact. It's evidence. Evidence that something hasn't given up on you yet. And here's the part that still gets me. Even now, years later. The invitation was never come to me when you're ready. It was always come to me when you're weary. Not the cleaned up version of you. Not the version that has prayed consistently for 6 months and built a solid morning routine. The weary version. The version that woke up with the list already running. The version that doesn't know how today is going to go. That version is exactly who the door is open for. You don't have to be okay to come to God. I've said that before on this channel. I'll keep saying it. Because I think it's the sentence that most of us need to hear more than almost anything else. Not as a warm thought, as a real functional truth about how prayer works. You don't earn your way in. You just turn. That's the prayer that changed my mornings. Not a long prayer. Not an elaborate one. A true one. One that starts in the exact place I actually am, and turns toward the one who's been there the whole time. Now, the question is what that looks like in practice. Because knowing this is one thing. Building it into a real morning. Your morning with the time you actually have and the state you actually wake up in. That's what I want to walk you through next. I want to make this as simple as possible. Because the mornings when you need this most are also the mornings when complicated doesn't work. 3 movements. That's it. Not 3 steps of a program. 3 movements, like turning towards something. Each one builds on the last, and the whole thing can fit inside 3 minutes, or 30 if you have them. The time doesn't change the movements, just the depth. The first movement. Name where you are. Before anything else, before gratitude, before asking for anything, just tell the truth about where you woke up. Not a performance of vulnerability, not a rehearsed confession, just the actual state, out loud or in your head or written down, however it comes naturally. I'm tired. I'm worried about this specific thing. I feel behind before the day has even started. I don't know how today is going to go. Whatever is true, say that first. When I started doing this, it felt strange, almost too simple to be prayer, like I was just complaining to God instead of praying to Him. But what I came to understand is that this is exactly what prayer is for. Not to show God a better version of yourself, to bring the real version, the one He already sees anyway. The naming does something. It takes the thing that was running as background noise, that low hum of dread or worry, and puts it somewhere specific. Outside of you, in front of you. And once it's there, you can actually deal with it. The second movement, remember that you woke up. After you've named where you are, pause, and let this one fact land. You're still here. Not because of anything you did, not because you prayed enough yesterday or got everything right. You opened your eyes this morning because something decided you weren't finished, and that something wasn't you. This is where I let that verse come back. The one about mercies being new every morning, not as a quote I'm supposed to say, as something I'm actually receiving. Another morning, another day, I'm still here. That means something. You don't have to feel it deeply for it to be true. Some mornings I say it and I feel it in my chest. Other mornings it's just a quiet acknowledgement, almost like checking a fact. Still here. Okay. Both count. The movement isn't about the feeling, it's about the turning. The third movement, ask for what you need for the next step. Not the whole day, the next step. This is the one most people skip. Or they get it slightly wrong. They ask for strength for the whole day, for everything to work out, for the anxiety to go away. And when those prayers feel too big, they stop before they've started. So make it smaller. Specific. What's the next thing in front of you? Give me what I need for this conversation, for this morning, for the next hour. That's it. Not a request to fix everything, a request for enough to take one step. I learned this the hard way. During the worst of my burnout, asking God to fix the whole situation felt impossible. The problem was too big. The prayer felt too small in comparison. But asking for enough to get through the next 2 hours, that I could do, and it was enough. Not because it solved everything, but because it got me to the next thing. And then the next. 3 movements. Name where you are. Remember that you woke up. Ask for the next step. Before you pick up your phone. Before you check what the day is asking of you. Even if you're still in bed. Even if you only have 2 minutes. The location doesn't matter. Bedroom, kitchen, car, doesn't change what these movements do. What matters is that they happen before the day sets the frame. Because if you wait until the day is already running, until the list is already active and the pressure is already on, you'll be catching up instead of starting. And here's what I want to be honest with you about, before we talk about what to expect when you start doing this, because I think you deserve a realistic picture, not an optimistic one. I'm not going to tell you that everything changes in the first week, because for me, it didn't. And I think if someone had told me that up front, instead of letting me find out the hard way, I would have stayed with it longer in the beginning, instead of wondering if I was doing something wrong. Here's what the first few days actually look like for most people, based on what I lived and what I hear from people who do this. You do the 3 movements. You name where you are. You remember that you woke up. You ask for the next step. And then you go about your day. And the day is still hard. The worry is still there. The conversation you were dreading still happens. And you go to bed that night thinking, did that do anything? The honest answer is yes. But not in the way you can measure on day 3. What's happening in the early days isn't dramatic, it's quiet, almost invisible. You're building something that doesn't show its results immediately, like a foundation being laid underground. You can't see it yet, but it's there. And it matters more than the part you'll eventually see. What I noticed first, and this usually starts somewhere in the first week or 2, wasn't that my days got easier. It was that there was a moment, somewhere in the middle of a hard day, where I remembered I wasn't alone in it. Not a feeling, not a wave of peace. Just a memory. Oh, I brought this to God this morning. I don't have to carry it like it's entirely mine. That moment, that small quiet shift, is the first thing that changes. Not the circumstances, the company. After a few weeks, something else starts to happen. The morning itself starts to feel different before you've even done the movements. Not lighter necessarily, but less ambushed. Like your nervous system starts to recognize that the first minutes of the day don't have to be a confrontation with everything that's wrong. There's a breath before the list, a pause that wasn't there before. That's not a small thing, that pause is actually everything. And I want to be honest about the harder part too, because there will be mornings, maybe many of them, especially at the beginning, where you do the movements and feel absolutely nothing. No shift, no quiet sense of presence, no relief. Just words going somewhere you can't confirm. I had those mornings. Lots of them. And I want to say something about them directly. Those mornings count just as much as the ones that feel alive. Maybe more. Because showing up when you feel nothing is not failed prayer. It's the purest form of faith there is. You're not there for the feeling. You're there because you believe the connection is real even when you can't feel it. There's a difference between feeling God's presence and knowing it's there. Faith, at its most honest, is often the second one without the first. And that's not a lesser version of faith. That's what faith actually is. What I can tell you, and I say this from years of practice, not from theory, is that the cumulative effect of this is real. It doesn't arrive all at once, it arrives in layers. A morning that felt lighter than usual. A week where the anxiety was still there but somehow less in charge. A month where you look back and realize, I've been starting from a different place. I didn't notice it happening. But it happened. The prayer doesn't fix your life. I want to be clear about that, because I think you've heard enough promises that it will. What it does is change where you're standing when you face your life. And over time, with consistency, with honesty, with the kind of showing up that doesn't require a feeling to justify it, that shift in where you're standing changes everything else. Not overnight, but for real. Now, before we get to the plan for tomorrow morning, I want to tell you about a few things that can get in the way. Not to discourage you, because I walked into every single one of them, and you don't have to. There are 3 things that interrupt this practice for almost everyone who starts it. And the tricky part is that none of them feel like mistakes when they're happening. They feel completely reasonable. That's what makes them worth naming. The first one, letting the phone go first. This one is subtle because it doesn't feel like you're skipping the prayer. It feels like you're just checking one thing quickly. and then you'll pray. But what happens in those first few minutes on your phone is that the day sets the frame before you do. You see a notification, a message, something that needs your attention, and suddenly your mind is already somewhere else. The worry is activated, the list is running, and when you finally get to the prayer, if you get to it, you're catching up instead of starting. I did this for weeks before I understood what I was actually doing. I thought the problem was that I wasn't disciplined enough to pray. The real problem was that I was handing the first minutes of my day to something that had no interest in helping me start well. The fix is simple, but it requires a decision the night before. Phone stays down until after the 3 movements. Not forever, just until after. 3 minutes. That's all the window you need to protect. The second one, praying the movements without being present in them. This one is harder to catch because it looks exactly like doing it right. You name where you are, but you're already thinking about breakfast. You remember that you woke up, but it's automatic, like a line you've memorized. You ask for the next step, and you've already moved on before the words have settled. You did the movements, but you weren't there for them. I fell into this somewhere around week 3. The practice had become familiar enough that I could do it on autopilot. And for a while I didn't notice the difference. But the days started to feel the same as before, like the prayer wasn't doing anything. And when I finally slowed down enough to pay attention, I realized I had turned something honest into something habitual. Same words. No presence. The way I learned to catch this, after the first movement, after naming where I am, I pause. A real pause. Long enough to actually hear what I just said, not to analyze it. Just to let it be real for a second before moving on. That one beat of actual presence changes everything about what comes after. The third one, using the absence of feeling as evidence that it's not working. This is the one that stops the most people. And I understand why. Because it's genuinely disorienting to do something sincerely and feel nothing in return. You showed up. You were honest. You named the weight. You remembered the mercy. You asked for what you needed. And you went through the whole day and nothing felt different, no peace, no clarity. The anxiety was still there at lunch, still there at dinner. And the thought comes, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm too far gone for this to work. I want to be direct about this one because I think it's the most dangerous of the 3. The absence of feeling is not the absence of God. I know I've said something like that earlier, but I want to say it here specifically in the context of the practice because it hits differently when you're 3 days in and wondering if you're wasting your time. Prayer is not a feeling delivery system. Some days it produces feeling, a lot of days it doesn't. What it produces consistently, underneath the feelings, regardless of the feelings, is orientation. You turned toward something real. That turning happened. It counts whether you felt it or not. The mistake is treating the feeling as the confirmation, using its absence as a reason to stop. I did that more than once, stopped a practice that was working because I couldn't feel it working yet. And every time I had to come back and start again from further behind than if I'd just stayed. If you wake up tomorrow and do the 3 movements and feel nothing, stay. Do it again the next morning. And the next. The consistency is not the thing you do until the feeling arrives. The consistency is the practice. The feeling when it comes is a gift on top. Now, you have everything you need. You know what to do, you know what to expect, and you know what to watch out for. There's only one thing left. Starting. And I want to make that as simple as possible for you. Here's the plan. And I mean that literally. Not a concept, not an idea. A plan. Something you can actually follow starting tomorrow morning. This week, one decision before you sleep tonight. Before you close your eyes tonight, decide where the 3 movements are going to happen tomorrow. Not when you'll feel like it. Not when the morning is calm enough, just where. Bed, floor, kitchen chair, doesn't matter. Pick a place. That's it. That one decision tonight removes one more thing your half-asleep brain has to figure out tomorrow. And decide that the phone waits. Not forever. Just until after. Put it across the room if that helps. Whatever it takes to protect those first few minutes before the day starts talking. Tomorrow morning. The minimum. If everything goes sideways, if you wake up late, if the kids are already up, if the morning is already a mess before it starts, here's the minimum. One movement. Just one. Name where you are. Out loud or in your head, 10 seconds before your feet hit the floor. God, I'm tired. I don't know how today is going to go. But I'm here. That's enough. That's a complete prayer. That's you turning toward something before the day turns you toward everything else. When you have more time, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, do all 3 movements. But on the hard mornings, on the late mornings, on the mornings where the minimum is all you have, the minimum counts. Don't skip it because you can't do it perfectly. Do the one thing. The first week, don't measure results. Measure consistency. I said this earlier, but I want to say it here in the context of the plan, because it matters most right now. In the first 7 days, the only question worth asking is, did I show up this morning? Not, did I feel something? Not, did my day go better? Just, did I turn toward God before the day set the frame? 7 mornings. That's the first goal. Not transformation, not a changed life. 7 mornings of showing up. After that, after the first week, you'll have something you didn't have before. A small but real thread of consistency, and that thread is what everything else gets built on. Not a dramatic spiritual breakthrough, just a thread. But threads, held long enough, become something you can actually hold on to. I want to say one more thing before we close. And I want to say it directly, not as encouragement, but as something I actually believe. The fact that you're still here at the end of this video tells me something. It tells me this landed somewhere real. That something in what we talked about today touched something you've been carrying. And if that's true, if this found you at a moment when you needed it, then you didn't end up here by accident. You woke up this morning. You're still here. That already means something. And tomorrow morning, before the day starts, before the list begins, before the phone tells you what needs your attention, you can start from a different place. Not a perfect place, not a place without weight, just a different one. A place where you remember you're not carrying this alone. That's what this prayer does, not all at once, but over time, in ways you'll look back on and recognize, it changes where you stand. And I want to be there for that with you, beyond this one video. We started this video talking about a particular kind of morning, the kind where the weight comes back before you've had a chance to choose anything, before you've decided how the day is going to go. The list, the worry, the dread, already running before your feet touch the floor. I spent years inside that kind of morning, and for a long time I thought the problem was me, that if I just prayed harder, believed more, felt more grateful, something would finally shift. What I didn't know then is what I hope you're leaving with now. The shift isn't about arriving at God in a better state. It's about arriving honestly, in whatever state you're actually in, tired, worried, unsure. Here I am. That's enough to begin. If you want to keep building on what we did today, if you want something that meets you every morning for the next 30 days the same way this video did, I put together something specifically for that. It's called 30 Days of Faith, a guided prayer devotional. Every day a prayer written and recorded by me, starting from wherever you actually are that morning, not from where you think you should be. 30 days of the same honesty we brought here today. The link is in the description. It's called 30 Days of Faith. If today landed somewhere real for you, I think the next 30 days will too. And if this video helped you, if something in it gave you a word you needed, or a way to start tomorrow that you didn't have before, share it with someone. You probably know someone who wakes up the way we talked about today. Send it to them. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is put the right thing in front of them at the right moment. I'll be here tomorrow with something new, and I'll see you in the morning.